Добрый вечер. На Первом канале
Ostanкино,
Останкино
the news from the information television agency. Today in the Kremlin, chaired by the President of the Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin, the Security Council meeting was held, at which they examined the question about the progress of measures being undertaken to restore constitutional lawfulness, law and order, and peace in the Chechnya Republic. The reports of the ministers who returned from the Northern Caucasus were heard. This was reported by the press service of the head of state. The President demanded unswerving compliance with constitutional demands and laws of the Russian Federation in defending the rights and liberties of citizens, public order, curtailing operations of unlawful armed formations, and inciting national or religious conflict. The Security Council of the Russian Federation directed the attention of all sources of mass media and the public to the fact that in nature there exists no conflict between Russia and Chechnya. This is said in a statement by the Security Council publicized in the Federative Council. In it, it's mentioned that in Chechnya there is a mere power struggle conducted by illegal armed groups in this part of Russia. Armed clashes with extensive human casualties must immediately cease, and all warring, militarized groups must be placed outside the law. The document emphasizes the need to undertake all constitutional measures to disarm and liquidate unlawful armed groups, the coordination of actions of all government structures in order to restore constitutional order in the Chechnya Republic is placed on Nikolai Yegorov, who by presidential decree today was appointed the deputy chairman of the government, it says in the statement of the Security Council. The process of conveying Russian military servicemen continues who are in prison in Grozny. This morning at the suburban Moscow airport Ramenskaya, a group of deputies of the Federal Assembly arrived from Chechnya headed by Sergei Yushchenkov and Grigory Yavlinsky with 7 Russian military personnel taken prisoner the 26th of November. On the same flight to Moscow, the bodies of 3 Russian military servicemen were delivered who died in Grozny. Today, the command of the Northern Caucasus military district was given 7 military servicemen who are in the airport Rostov-on-the-Don and are waiting to be sent to Moscow. On Thursday, the 8th of December, the transfer of several more Russian military servicemen is expected, their numbers being specified by the command of the Northern Caucasus military district. As a spokesman of the Temporary Information Center of the government reported from Vostok, the process of conveyance will occur in Grozny. Meanwhile, Liturtas reports that the situation in Chechnya is not yet diffused, but already there are signs of some settling. Fewer war-oriented speeches at the rallies underway in downtown Grozny are heard, and there are more people on the streets. Meanwhile, armed detachments of Jahar Dudayev are conducting active preparations for defense. Dudayev units are placed on barracks alert from the populated points. The conscription is underway from among the more loyal people to Dudayev. A death sentence regiment was assembled, stationed in immediate proximity to the presidential palace. Also, women's battalions are being formed. In the evening, Liturtas reported that over Grozny again there were flights, first 1 and then 2 Russian combat planes, ostensibly Su-25 destroyers, but they launched no raids on the city. This, a correspondent of the agency was told by the on-duty person at the central command point of the armed forces of Chechnya. In his opinion, they were reconnaissance flights. While the planes passed over the city, they were fired at. Today, at the morning session of the Federative Council, the previously planned discussion of the situation in Chechnya did not take place. Apart from the fact that the Speaker, Vladimir Shumeyka, was participating at that time in the work of the Security Council, many senators complained about the absence of any information. And yet, despite the fact that in the chamber all the morning discussions were conducted of the utmost importance, the topic of Chechnya was suspended in midair. The most terrible thing today is that we're forgetting the Russian-speaking population which lives in Chechnya. We have become involved in the problem between Avturkhanov and Dudayev's interaction, the problem of internal Chechenian tussles. But we've forgotten the fact that this is Russia, this is Russian territory, and the approach to this territory must be in compliance with the Constitution of Russia and the laws of the Russian Federation. In the afternoon, behind closed doors, Vladimir Shumeyka made an announcement to the deputies. The discussion of the question is postponed until tomorrow. The Federative Council adopted today the law on the accounting chamber. Its objectives will be to control the execution of the country's budget. Ratified was a series of international agreements. Today's session of the Duma began very turbulently, and discussion of the agenda, in essence, became a 2-hour session of political statements and demands. Protesting this, the Russia's Choice faction left the auditorium, and the Duma, after the contribution of Vladimir Zhirinovsky, was deprived of the cooperation of the 12th of December Union. The Decembrists attempted to protest and even promised to file a lawsuit against the Duma, but the parliamentarians remained unyielding, and their registration of this deputy amalgamation was revoked. As for the rest of the legislative work, today the minds of the deputies continue to be disturbed by the Chechnya crisis. The leader of the Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov, demanded the president take upon himself full responsibility for Chechnya and that the deputies create a special commission to investigate. Vladimir Zhirinovsky organized a meeting with 2 prisoners who returned from Chechnya. The soldiers stated that in the operation there were 82 people involved. 76 persons who were attacking Grozny, and 4 remained in reserve. That is 78. I'm from the Combat Division 4662, the 12th Regiment, the 12th Tank Regiment. I was recruited upon agreement with our commander and the Federal Service of Counterintelligence. Can you tell us the surname of the officer who held talks with you? The officer who spoke with us is the head of the regiment, Major Yuryev. Later, the press conference developed into a verbal confrontation. Vladimir Zhirinovsky was dissatisfied with questions. The fellow is demobilized. I must say that he has no right to answer such questions. You have no right to ask which regiment. I know he hasn't the right to say which combat unit. And you have no right to engage him in this conversation. If he was given an order, he was obliged to carry out the order. And these fellows now you are going to destroy, and you are the murderers. You're the journalist murderers of these soldiers. Don't you understand that they were sentenced to death back in Grozny? In detail, the Chechnya events will be discussed tomorrow by the deputies at a closed session, to which it was decided to invite Jahar Dudayev and parliamentarians of Chechnya. After lengthy discussion, the deputies of the State Duma could not reach a unanimous opinion on what the state symbols of the Russian Federation should be, like the national flag, the coat of arms, and the hymn. The President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, through his decree, relieved the Minister of Justice, Yuri Kolmykov, from his post. This, the press service of the head of the Russian state announced in a communique of the press service. It's not indicated who will now occupy the post of the Minister of Justice. Boris Yeltsin instructed the acting Prosecutor General, Alexander Yelushenko, and the Minister of Internal Affairs, Viktor Yedin, to immediately investigate the circumstances of the events of the 2nd of December of this year near the municipal mayor's office in Moscow and report on the results and measures undertaken. This was reported to Interfax today by the President's Secretary, Press Secretary Vyacheslav Kostikov. According to the latter, Boris Yeltsin, who became acquainted with additional information regarding the incident near the Moscow's mayor's office, is aware of the broad resonance which this event evoked in the public, the press, bank, and business circles. The President shares the critical concern of the public. This was emphasized by Vyacheslav Kostikov. We have every possibility in order to make next year the year of financial stabilization of Russian industry. This was stated by the chairman of the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin, today. He was speaking at the opening of the International Conference on Bank Business in Russia. According to the midterm program being developed by the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin reported, foreseeably there is achievement of priority objectives to stifle inflation and achieve macroeconomic stabilization. The many discussions on the fuel energy sector on various levels of government rule resulted in the document under the name The Energy Strategy of Russia until the year 2010, which was examined today at the Commission on Current Issues. Russia is one of the richest countries in its energy resources. By the year 1988, it reached 13% of the overall natural resource tapping on Earth, with a population of less than 3%. However, consumption per capita is 1.5 times less than, for example, in the United States, and the expenditure per unit of product is 3 times higher than indicators in developed countries. Therefore, the focal point of the government strategy will be not increasing productivity, but increasing effectiveness of power consumption and power conservation. This is paramount. According to those who developed the program, the rationalization of energy usage will have an economic effect 5-fold exceeding the expenditures on energy consumption, and simultaneously will increase export potentials of the country in fuel and energy. The energy program was ratified by a commission, and after further work will be submitted to the government, but in the form of a draft decree of the President of Russia. According to predictions of the Economics Ministry, next year the number of unemployed in Russia will reach 5 million people. This was told in an interview to Interfax by the Vice Premier of the government, Yuri Yarev. According to him, this is an optimistic prediction. The Vice Premier is in Krasnoyarsk currently on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the RIMS formation. Debts of companies of the district of the association Chilap Energy exceed 750 billion rubles. In these conditions, the energy workers warn that at any time they have the right to disconnect electricity and heating feed. And what does this mean for tens of metallurgical plants on a 24-hour shift and the chemical plant Mayak, where plutonium and uranium are produced, the Russian Federal Nuclear Center, the State Missile Center in Yasu? And consequences of a sudden stoppage of these objects is simply unpredictable. In these conditions, strikes at several mines of the South Ural coal basin are underway. The delegates of the Third Congress of the Independent Unions of Miners of Russia, which ended in Chelyabinsk, supporting the demands of the miners to immediately pay salaries which were delayed for several months, nevertheless expressed a negative attitude to the strikes underway, calling this action untimely and unprepared. The position of the delegations played a role. 2 of the 4 striking mines, the Red Garnyachka and the Capital Mine, resumed their work. But will the patience of miners be for long if the government and the tangible consumers will not settle their debts? In today's trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the rate of the dollar was at 3,292 rubles against the American dollar, which is 17 rubles higher than yesterday's indicator. Today, at midday, at the main assembly belt of the joint stock company, the Gorky automobile plant, the 10,000th 1.5-ton pickup truck was assembled, the GAZ 3302, the Gazelle. If you remember, the first serial models of this brand 5 were performed the 20th of July this year, but the level of 10,000 was planned to be achieved in the last days of December. But as you see, the auto manufacturers have beaten the clock, and the market dictated this to them. On the streets of Moscow, there are now very few large trucks, that is, trucks which weigh more than 5 tons, produced by our plants. The country has adopted a free market system, and there's now a demand for lower capacity trucks, such as the 1.5 ton. And the only plant which immediately reacted to the demand of the market was the Gorky automobile plant. Its 1.5 ton model has breathed life into the assembly belt of the 5-ton vehicles, which had stopped. In the history of domestic automobile production, the Gazelle, as this model is called, will enter as the first vehicle developed on a computer. As was told to us by the main designer of the plant, Yuri Vladimirovich Kudryavtsev, if we did not take a risk and did not adopt these forms of developing automobiles, we would have had to wait 5 years for the 1.5 ton. Previously, designers worked with large sheets of aluminum and thousands of parts manufactured in hundreds of versions. Today, on displays, one may see each section and the entire vehicle altogether. Its mathematical model exists, and the computer helps the designer in a brief time to develop the optimum variation and instantly prepare a blueprint. This is one of the secrets why Western firms feel so confident on the market. In our country, for now, only the design office GAZ has adopted a contemporary format of designing automobiles, and the result is evident. This is our only plant which works with the full load and has a confident demand. And on displays are new versions of the Gazelle family, that which today is needed on the market. The new plant producing carbonated fruit drinks opened in suburban Moscow Vidnaya. This joint Russian-Czech plant, the ambassador of the Czech Republic, who was present at the opening ceremony, emphasized that the development of integration between the 2 former partners should yield not only political but economic benefits. Regarding the products of the plant themselves, they, in the opinion of producers, promised to become very popular among consumers, mostly because of its high quality, which is ensured by contemporary equipment of Italian, French, and German production. It provides strict control over the quality on each level of the technological chain. In Germany, specially designed and produced were filters considering the chemical composition of the water used, and the labor and almost all raw materials are Russian. Therefore, the beverages of the suburban Moscow plant with the poetic name Magia are significantly cheaper than imports, although in quality they surpass many of them. The scientists of St. Petersburg could begin an organized strike at any day if measures are not taken to increase funds allocated for science. Probably Mikhail Vasilyevich Lomonosov couldn't foresee that in the end of the 20th century, for the first time in Russia, Petersburg scientists would be forced into the extreme measure of protesting by striking. It will be held in the end of January if the government does not meet their demands. The main thing is to finally realize those decrees and laws which were adopted by the higher ruling body of Russia. Those speaking at the meeting compared the state of domestic science with the palatial and park sites in Petersburg, which in the first months of war were destroyed and burned. Of course, each comparison lacks something, but in recent years, financing of scientific research has decreased by 7 times. Many ideas and designs perish at the root. Young scientists can't endure and eventually go abroad. Incidentally, now in Hamburg, the leading specialists from the Institute of Nuclear Physics in Gachin are raising the prestige of German science, and ours perishes. This is a time-lapsed reaction mind, said the scientists, whose explosion in a few years could lead to the intellectual impoverishment of Russia. Because of the lack of electrical power at the television retransmitter in Tbilisi, we unfortunately couldn't receive material from our personal correspondents in Armenia, where today they mark the memory of the victims of the earthquake which occurred 6 years ago in the Patotsk region of the Republic. According to official statistics, then around 25,000 people died, more than 50,000 were injured. Almost 500,000 residents of the Republic were left without homes. 20% of the overall housing of the Republic was destroyed. The material damage caused by the earthquake is assessed at $6 billion. Today was a non-working day in Armenia. Saddam Hussein, in a personal letter to Boris Yeltsin, welcomed the Russian initiative in resolving the issue of alleviating sanctions against Iraq. This was stated today to the journalists in Moscow by the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz. Lately, at meetings of the UN Security Council, Russia often has raised the question about alleviating sanctions against Iraq imposed on it after the war of 1991. It's necessary to note that as a result of the efforts of Russian diplomacy, Baghdad officially recognized Kuwait as a sovereign country in the borders established by the UN. Thereby, Iraq fulfilled one of the basic conditions of the international community vis-à-vis the lifting of the embargo. It's quite evident that until Baghdad receives an opportunity to sell its oil, and that is its main source of revenue, it will not be able to pay its creditors, pay for lawsuits filed against it after the war, and correct its economic situation. However, the Security Council for now is not inclined to revoke the sanctions. All of this was discussed in the conversation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, with the Vice Premier of Iraq, Tariq Aziz. We are for the position that the Security Council should operate not like a sledgehammer, but that it should be used as a more flexible instrument. And if the Security Council wants to be a flexible, effective instrument of politics or diplomacy, and not an instrument for the satisfying of internal political demands of individual countries, then it must be able to insist on its own, but at the same time also be able to react flexibly toward the positive steps in fulfilling its decisions. The President of Abkhazia, Vladislav Artemba, flew today to Moscow, where he should meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, and the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachev. This Interfax was told in the administration of the Abkhazian President. According to an official reports, possibly the 12th of December in Geneva, there will be a meeting between Artemba and the head of Georgia, Edvard Shevardnadze, with the Secretary General of the UN, Boutros Ghali. Units of Bosnian Serbs and regiments of Muslim autonomists continue to squeeze the 5th Corps of the Muslim Regular Forces in western Bosnia. According to the Serb military command, the situation near Bihać is fully controlled by Serb units. In Namibia, the first general elections began after gaining independence. According to predictions, the ruling party, the National Organization of Southwest Africa, SWAPO, will continue to lead in the country and will receive more than 2/3 of the mandates in parliament. The famous Italian investigator Antonio Di Pietro resigned. The reason for the sensational decision was the constantly growing pressure on the investigative team which he headed, which is launching the inquiry into corruption of highest political business circles under the name Clean Hands. On the initiative of the investigative brigade, an agenda with a subpoena from the prosecutor's office was sent to the chairman of the Ministerial Council, Silvio Berlusconi. A powerful explosion occurred today in a bustling quarter of the South Korean capital, a result of the gas leak from an underground pipeline. During the course of an hour, the firemen could not control the flames, which incinerated tens of automobiles and one-story homes. The wave of explosion shattered windows of buildings within a radius of 300 meters. According to preliminary reports, 3 people have died, 6 people are missing. Many have been taken to hospital with burns and injuries of varying degrees. Itotas reports that on the territory of the Windsor Castle, the 800-year-old suburban residence of the British monarchs, there are significant oil deposits, and the Queen, Elizabeth II, has already given her permission for test boring of the site. The 28-year-old Claudia Null is the youngest minister in Germany's history in the new government of Helmut Kohl. She is a philologist by education, graduated in the former GDR. She calls for strengthening the family unit as the nucleus of society, while her husband, which is no secret for the press, is a house husband and raises their child to the benefit of his wife's career. Approval of the new minister's candidacy was not received in society because of her youthful age and the complexity of issues which she faces. One of them, international marriages. Statistics affirm that annually in the FRG, more than 500,000 international families are registered. For every 3 marriages, there is 1 divorce. The well-being and honest intention of mixed couples in FRG is closely watched by organs of protection of public order and city departments on foreigners' affairs. The base of their work, volunteers, informants, neighbors, shop owners, private detectives who take pride in informing responsible organs about any negative manifestations in relations between newlyweds. Such a lid is often not endured by strong family ties as well. The immigration services, traffic police, or tax inspection, under the pressure of any of these law enforcement bodies, reporting on real or imaginary violations is in the blood of any German Bürger. The law-abiding German does not think about possible consequences of his own judgments and observations of those neighbors who live on a different level of values. In Rio de Janeiro, a triumphant assembly was held of the Academy of Brazilian Literature, dedicated to the 100th birthday of Mikhail Yurovich Lermontov. The solitary sail shines white in the mist of a blue sea. These lines of our great poet were heard for the first time in Portuguese on distant Brazilian soil. Academics of literature spoke about the great influence of Russian literature, sang the praises to the genius of Lermontov, elevating him from a rebellious spirit into almost a revolutionary. Please, my antecedent was never such, protests the 86-year-old Alexander Lermontov, who today is the closest blood relative and descendant of the poet. Taken from Bolshevik Russia in his youth, half his life he drifted abroad until finally, 50 years ago, he settled here in Rio de Janeiro, founding the Brazilian branch of the Lermontov family tree. Brazilians know very little about Lermontov. There's only one translated book here, The Hero of Our Time, which is sold, and that is the only one. In Brazil, is there interest toward Russia? Yes, there is great interest toward Russia and in its culture as well, but little is known. To satisfy the thirst of mutual knowledge and understanding is the objective of the Institute of Cultural Ties between Brazil and Russia in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, founded 4 months ago and named Mikhail Lermontov. Next year, we plan to hold in several Brazilian cities the first festival of Russian culture and are preparing to open in the center of Rio de Janeiro a permanently functioning House of Russia named Lermontov. On the basis of the Academy of Arts in Russia, such famous names are connected like Bazhanov, Kramskoy, Repin, Surikov, and it's known that at times diploma works of the masters of the past would become real artistic discoveries. In Moscow, there is a debut of the young. Only 75 years separate the appearance of the Moscow Institute in the name Surikov from the founding of the Academy of Arts in Petersburg, where, incidentally, in museums, the diploma and course works of graduates of more than 200 years are being kept. But this is one school, the same traditions as the Russian Academy of Arts. Today, in its auditorium, these two art institutions display the best works of their graduates over the last 2 years. It's interesting that here there are not only traditional works in painting, graphics, and sculpture, but the works executed in restorational workshops of the Repin Institute. The young people restored the paintings of the Netherlands collection and the Italian school from the Pavlovian Palace. Drawing attention are the works of the young artists of theater, their costumes, decorations for classical operas, ballets, and dramatical productions. And the book illustrations, exquisite in their style, are executed according to all the laws of the book and its architectonics. New architectural products, models, decorative panels, monumental panels, in a word, all aspects of creative life of the country's two largest higher academic institutions, the best traditions of the Russian school, which developed more than 200 years ago and are not lost, and each graduate today with pride can say, I'm a Repinets or I'm a Surkivets. The coming year, 1995, according to the ancient Eastern calendar, will be the year of the pig. And although toward this animal we don't experience particular tender feelings, its year promises only good for all of us and mostly abundance and flourishment. As the publication Arguments and Facts writes, today one must celebrate the New Year's Eve at a table covered with all types of fare, having donned oneself, of course if they're available, family jewels, and a colorful new outfit. And furthermore, the life-loving oinker is not only a symbol of luxury and gratification of one's stomach, but of voluptuousness as well. And if on New Year's Eve you find your senses are particularly vibrant, you will then be under the patronage of the pig for the remainder of the year. With this, I bid you farewell and all the best. In 1 hour, the final matches in the group leagues of the Championship League. After the matches of Paris Saint-Germain, Moscow, Spartak, and Kiev Dynamo Bavaria, will find out the second quarterfinalist from Group B, who will face the Swedish Göteborg. Good evening, and let's wish good luck to the team of Oleg Romantsev. Watch the direct broadcast from Paris on Channel 1 Ostankino at 22:20. And yesterday, 6 response matches were played in the 1/8 finals of the UEFA Cup. Italy was successful. 3 clubs are in the next round now, and Naples is playing today. And now, about a sensation on the stadium of Santiago Bernabeu. Defeating the hosts with a 3-2 score, the modest Danish team, the Madrid Real looked placated after Peterson missed the ball. The hosts should have mobilized, but that evening was not the best for Real. At the last moment, the Danes conducted an elegant counterattack, and the most titled club in Europe was now out of the competition. At the World Chess Olympics in Moscow, the 7th round. From now on, the most interesting part of the tournament begins. Our first team plays with the French team after the defeat by the Bulgarian Topalov. Garry Kasparov has won against Gilles Lautier. The Russians lead 2.5 by half a point. In Moscow, the presentation of the traditional Izvestia hockey tournament occurred. Beginning the 16th of December, 8 teams will compete for the prize fund of 250,000 Swiss francs. Matches will be held at the Luzhniki and Army Ice Stadiums, possibly on the Russian team. NHL profiles will be playing. In the regular championship of the International Hockey League, the regular matches in the Western Zone, the Army of Moscow competing for the spot in the 1/8 hosted North Stal. The decisive victory of the Army is 6-0. In the East, the hosts were also unusually unhospitable in these matches. The guests had not a single victory. Let's note the victory of the leader, Magnitogorsk Metallurg, over the same club from Novokuznetsk 4-1. Good evening. A belt of high atmospheric pressure, which stretches from southeast Europe to the Volga-Vyatsk area, will influence the weather of the northern and central regions of European Russia. According to the Oceanic Meteorological Center, tomorrow the Kola Peninsula, Karelia, Arkhangelsk District, and the Republic of Komi will have partly cloudy skies with isolated light snows. Temperatures at night -10 to 15, during the day from -2 to -7. In the central and Volga-Vyatsk area, it will be partly cloudy with isolated light snows. temperatures from -5 to 10. In the northwest area and the Baltic countries, a new wave of warm Atlantic air is rushing in, and tomorrow during the day an atmospheric front will arrive in the area, and with it cloudy skies, rain and wet snow. Temperature during the night and day from 0 to +5, in the northwest area from 0 to -3. Belarus, Ukraine and Moldova will be also in an area of high pressure, and therefore expected there are partly cloudy skies without precipitation. In the morning and evening there will be patches of fog, temperatures from 0 to +5. In the central Chernozem region, on the central and lower Volga, in the Rostov district and in the northern Caucasus, it will be cloudy with precipitation. There we will expect the influence of a low atmospheric pressure zone and an atmospheric front. At night it will be quite chilly, -2 to -7. During the day, -1 to +4. In Sochi, +7, with icy road conditions. In the northern Caucasus, wet snow with fog and drizzle. Wet snow accumulation is possible, and also snowslides in the mountainous areas. Beyond the Caucasus, partly cloudy skies without significant precipitation. Georgia and Azerbaijan, 0 +5. In Armenia, -2 to 7. In St. Petersburg, it will be cloudy with isolated light snow. Winds are from the southeast. At night, -2 to 4. During the day, -1 to 3 degrees with icy road conditions. In Moscow, cloudy, but possibly the snow will appear for a brief time. At night, -8 to 10. Throughout the district, -13, with some isolated patches of snow. During the day, -5 to -7. Winds are northerly. In the next 2 days, there are no major changes expected in the weather. This ends our broadcast. All the best.